It's a nice background you got there, Jay.
Yeah, you got a better backdrop there now.
All right, thanks everyone for joining us for another episode of Displacement Podcast. I'm Oz. Next to me, I got Paul from CPR, and we got Killer on the end.
Yeah.
And today we're talking race fuels again with Jay Berry from Ignite. So Jay, tell us about Ignite and what you guys do.
So Ignite was created almost 20 years ago. We were out before there was Pump E85 in the United States. After 9/11 happened, I went to New York City and saw the World Trade Centers and decided I wanted to come back home, and I farmed and said I wanted to make our own fuel. So I started building our ethanol plant at 22 years old. So in 2005, actually 2002, I created CIE, and then in 2004, I created Ignite Racing Fuel. And I wanted an opportunity to be able to prove to people that ethanol won't hurt your engine. And so that's kind of how it came about with Ignite, was to show people, hey, we're running high blends of ethanol in engines. It doesn't hurt them in the racing world. You have nothing to worry about trying to run 10% ethanol in your everyday car.
Yeah, I think that was one of the big hesitancies in the U.S. market, was that ethanol was bad for your engine. You know, it's going to create problems. It's going to cause issues with your injectors and the fuel system. But your main goal in changing that, when you see some of your old PR footage and stuff with you talking, that was one of the main things you were trying to get across, is that it doesn't do that for the vast majority of people. As well as now, like, as I said to you, most people will leave Ignite in their car.
Oh, yeah.
And you can run it over, whereas some other, racing fuels, you can't do that.
All right.
And we run Ignite and everything in Super Duty pickups with the Godzilla engine. You know, I tell everybody, even if you have a non-flex fuel vehicle, you can run my fuel, my E85 or my E90 in it. The only thing that'll happen is your check engine light comes on. But we literally run it in everything without an ethanol tune, and we don't have any issues. There's no lead, no MTB, no race gas in my fuel, so there's nothing in my fuel that can harm your vehicle or your engine.
Oh, that's really cool to know.
Yeah, because the additives like MTB is really what messes up your injectors. It causes seals to swell as well.
MTB was it was an aromatic. It was used as an octane booster, but it's also highly it's very toxic, causes cancer, pollutes groundwater. And so ethanol offsets that. And pure ethanol, the octane based on ethanol is 116 octane. When I created Ignite, no one has ever done, and to this day, nobody still has ever done a octane test on ethanol besides me. So we took pure 200 proof alcohol, ethanol with absolutely nothing in it, no water, no nothing, and sent it off, and actually had to create a one-cylinder engine to be able to come up with an octane rating. So today, that's why Ignite's the only fuel that has octane ratings. Nobody else has done that test.
So tell us, Jay, you're developing this race fuel that you're selling to everyone that's doing great stuff. How do you make sure that it's at the standard that you want it to be there? What's the quality control like?
One of the different things, I think, quality control of me versus anybody else, literally around the world. Nobody else makes their own product. We do. My formula that I have today hasn't changed in 20 years since I created Ignite, and we control the process. You know, I make 80 million gallons, 300,000 gallons a day of 200 proof alcohol, and we make high grade alcohols. And so unlike other people that have to go buy their ethanol, they're getting it off the rack. They don't know what it is. They don't know where it comes from. My alcohol comes from right across the road from my plant. So we're completely vertically integrated. You know, the other thing, besides making alcohol and racing fuel, I also farm. So I grow a lot of the corn that goes into grinding and fermenting to make the alcohol that goes into our racing. So nobody else around the world actually makes their fuel. Everybody else is just kind of a chemical blender. You can go do what they do. They just buy chemicals and additives and mix it together. Mine is made fresh. I mean, every day from the moment I get my alcohol till usually when it goes out the door, it's less than 40. It's been distilled and it's less than 48 to 50 hours old.
Wow. So you guys kind of control the process from start to finish, essentially.
Exactly. You can't get beer as fresh as what I can ship out my fuel.
Wow. That is really interesting. Now, I guess being around for 20 years, have you guys evolved a lot since you initially started?
Yeah, I mean, when I got started, literally nobody knew what ethanol was. I mean, if you look at, we're into UTVs, wave runners, jet skis. Almost all the drifters all over the world now are running ethanol, a lot of the offshore boats. nobody knew what it was. So it took a long time to get momentum to get us to where we are today. And it's been interesting because a lot of people always ask, what do you think? All of your competition, everybody has ethanol fuels today. Well, 15 years ago, VP, Sunoco, Renegade, Torco all said they would never have an ethanol fuel. We forced everybody to have to change. I mean, they all hated ethanol. I guarantee you if Ignite would shut down today, tomorrow, all those other fuel companies would stop selling ethanol fuels because they cannot stand ethanol with a passion. But it's been pretty unique to watch, kind of nice to see how we've actually opened the doors for other farmers, other ethanol plants to be able to get their fuel into the market. Even if you're not buying my ethanol, you're buying it from somebody else. It helps the ag community out. So it's been a positive in that way.
Okay, nice. It's kind of strange that you mentioned that because one of the questions I kind of had was, we follow a lot of different YouTubers. There's Cletus McFarlane, there's Adam LZ, there's Boosted Boys. And all of these guys use you and your fuel as, something that's really big. And as you said, maybe 10 years ago, that wouldn't have been the case. So knowing those YouTubers, you were talking about drag racing, drifting, circuit racing. I mean, Ignite looks to be in all of these different types of motorsports. How did you come about being able to effect that kind of change and getting into all of those different categories?
One of the biggest things was actually being able to build relationships with people. I knew Adam LZ for a couple of years before he went on to start running our fuel. And so, one of the things is my fuel, if anybody runs it, the fuel speaks for itself. It performs. But the other thing is, it's like I tell guys, like in Formula Drift, I've got about 80, probably closer to 90% of the FD drivers are on Ignite. Some of those guys just came on board 2 to 3 years ago. And it's like I tell guys, I go up, shake their hand, ask them how they're doing, try to help them in the pits. When they're ready to switch over, I'm here, but I'm not up pushing my product on those guys. They know where I'm at. They know how good our fuel is. And when they're ready to make a change, I'm here. And, and it's building those relationships with our customers. It's no different than, working with you and Alex and Kid ourselves. To me, it's really about building the relationship. And then that bond there will bring in people to start buying the fuel. And that's one thing that I preach with the guys that work for me, all of us, is, people have our phone numbers. I mean, we talk to people 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'll have people message me, call me on Sunday. I'll have people call me at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night and I answer. And it's not a telephone. It's not a guy behind a desk. I want to know what my customers are thinking. I want to know what you're going, what's going on. I like hearing from the racers. The best way to keep up to date is by me actually talking to you guys and kind of finding out, hey, what's happening? Who are some people that they're good to work with? The thing for us is I don't have a big market. I don't have a marketing team, but what we've done is we've got quality over quantity, and we've worked with the best tuners around the world and actually let them sell our product for us.
Gotcha. That's a good strategy. I was just about to say, Paul has made significant strides with the brand locally, I'd say, over the past 3 to 5 years. So I'll kind of let him take the wheel as well and dive into a few of the stuff.
I started with Jay and Ignite through Alessandro De Luca, he's kind of the Caribbean distributor. So I go through him, and when I have questions or concerns about things, that gets relayed to Jay. And it's pretty much coming straight back from his mouth. That's one thing that Alessandro's always told me is, what you're hearing is not from some guy somewhere, it's Jay. I kind of started doing Ignite was in 2016 when I was building my car, my blue car at the time. And it was recommended to me by a tuner from Texas, which is Eric Coaster from Cosmic Motorsports. He was Cosmic, okay. So he was the one that was tuning my car, and we were looking to take the next step going forward in terms of, power and all that kind of stuff. And at the time, the only fuel you could get here in terms of ethanol was what was pump ethanol from the States that was being put in drums at a gas station and sent here. So with that, you didn't have the consistency. People that had flex fuel sensors could see you were getting E70 one time, E68, sometimes you'd get E80, but it wasn't consistent. So you're not going to get the most potential out of it. And Eric basically recommended to me was, we use Ignite over there. It's good, it's consistent, you'll make power on it. And that's kind of how I started out small. And one of the first adopters of that was also Helter Skelter. I think, again, most people here would know that speaks for itself. Everybody's seen the car come from being a, you know, an 11-second car down to an 8-second car as it is now.
It's not one of our fastest Subarus in the island.
Yeah, it's one of the fastest Subarus in the Caribbean.
Yeah, so there we go.
Yeah, I mean, they were making over 1,100 horsepower at one point, turned down a little bit now, you know, try and make it more, save the longevity of the engine, if you want to put it that way.
A little safer.
You know, they're still there at 9.0, 8.9. They're right on that borderline of it there. So for us here, it's been a good product. I've tried to push it, and personally, it's what I've always run. And one of the main things for that is that, you know, a lot of the other fuels, as you say, have MTB and other stuff, which if you ever notice when Ignite's burning, it smells like sweet corn juice. It doesn't have a very harsh smell. It doesn't like burn your nose. Some of the other fuels, you'll find that burn in your nose is the chemicals, and that's those chemicals like MTB, which one, aren't good for you, aren't good for the environment, and two, you know, it's very harsh on the fuel system components in your engine, especially injectors.
A lot of the other guys are putting a lot of lead and race gas don't really mix well with ethanol also. The reason is ethanol's got a high flash point. Your aromatics, like the MTB, the race gas has a low flash point. So when you blend that with ethanol and try to make your racing fuel out of it, you get pre-detonation because your engine's never happy. So that's one thing. When I developed our fuels, we spent a lot of time trying different mixes, you know, trying some lead stuff, you know, really working hard, trying to put a little methanol in. None of that stuff worked. It had a reverse effect, and it did not work. So one of the other things I did, you know, some of the other positives on our fuel are they're biodegradable. You know, that's one reason why a lot of the Wave Runner jet ski offshore boats, and even in the United States, a lot more of the private land that's used at park, or not really private, public, they're being very strict on people about leaks and different things and having bellies and bladders under stuff for pollution. Well, our fuel, 90% of it's biodegradable. Oh, nice. And so it's been cleaner. It's better for the environment due to that purpose. And also with the ethanol, it gets rid of your carbon buildup. There's no carbon, so we know for a fact our fuel knocks out over 80% of the emissions out of your tailpipe in your race car. You know, a lot of people, and even a lot of kids in racing and go-karts and shifter carts, they're sitting there, or mini drag, and they sit so low when they're so close to each other, they're inhaling a lot of the emissions coming out of their engines and have a lot of issues. This does away with that. And we also designed our fuel to be safe in that ethanol has you can't see ethanol burn, and so my fuel was designed with an upper end lube to help you out, and then also designed specific so you could see the flame. One of those videos was Adam LZ's girlfriend. She was out drifting at an event and had a fuel rail come off, and you can actually see the fuel come up into the cab. If our fuel was not designed, she never would have known she was on fire. But Colette was able to actually see it, stop, get out. And that's one of the very important things to me about our fuel is, it's badass, it works good, but also from a safety standpoint.
It's like things like most alcohols, but like methanol, for example, when that burns, it's just clear. You'll see the heat wave, but you won't actually see a flame or smoke.
Or the source where it's coming from.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, that's also something too. I didn't really know that it has in something like that for if and when it catches fire, but it's good knowledge to have as well.
Yeah, I mean, it happens in dynos. There's a lot of times things happen. I mean, there's the, every dyno shop's had some time where some fire happened. And like I said, our fuel, that's one of the things that was important when I was developing it and working with engine builders and dyno people and listening. One of the things I like to do is listen to our customers. I'll have people call me up and say, hey, I've got a Honda, I'm pushing 230 horsepower. I need your most expensive, best fuel. We're running Q16. So why are you running Q16? You don't need that much juice. Sometimes, I'd rather talk to my customers, find out what their needs are. And with those people, we actually do like an E30 blend where we're taking E98 and blending it with 91, 93 octane. And they're actually making more power because my fuel is more of an extender than being the base fuel for it. And it's able to save them and actually help them, get what they need versus trying to sell them the most expensive thing where I make the most margin. It's more important to me to figure out what is my customers, what do they need, and get them heading in the right direction.
As you said that, Jay, how much has that influenced your formula for your fuel over the years? depending on what your customers say and what they want from their performance?
It is very important. Actually, we're working on developing some new fuels right now. I'm glad you brought that up. That our guys are kind of our lower end guys, kind of beginning bolt-on guys, UTV, wave runner, jet ski guys that will be able to dump and go. They won't have to make any adjustments to injectors, any on their maps. They won't have to adjust spark plugs. So it's one thing that as we're evolving, I found, I've seen a need out there, and we've created a fuel to kind of help those guys, because currently what they're running costs, $125 to $200 for 5-gallon pails, and we're going to be able to make a fuel much cheaper than that is much better than what they're currently running. So like I said, it's always important for me to get out and talk to people, and one of the things why I like to talk to our customers is there's a lot of things that we know about ethanol that a lot of people don't, as far as the spark plugs, the injectors, fuel pump, just some little things of being able to really fine tune and help them get to be where they need to be.
So basically is making it more user friendly, making it more user friendly for everybody, that it's more, you can throw in and go without needing all the extra components that you would normally need, or having to change your injectors to bigger injectors that way.
Yep. And one thing that we also do is, one of the reasons why we're growing, we have a lot of people that call us, say, hey, look, you're kind of the ethanol guys, you understand this. And they'll be running our competition's fuel, but they can't help them or answer any questions on ethanol. And people will literally call us and say, hey, we're running your competitor's fuel. We're completely lost. Could you help us? Because they don't understand. They can't help us. And so even though they're running somebody else's fuel, we spend a lot of time even educating them and helping them out. And then, a year or two later, they may call us back and say, hey, I remember when you called me, and it was really nice that you helped me on your, on their fuel. Could you get me a price? We'd be interested in working with you.
Oh, nice. So is that something that you do regularly? For example, let's say Khaled had his car that he was working on, and his tuner could probably call you up and say, hey, this is what I'm running in his car. This is what I'm experiencing. Can you tell me what changes to make?
Yes. Yeah. I've had quite a few of those. Matter of fact, I had a couple of them yesterday morning with some guys out of Texas that called me that had questions, and I was able to help them out and get them kind of where they needed to be.
With Ignite's current products, if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
With here.
So what we've got 3 products. We have our E98, which is E98. Some people do run as a strict race gas, but ethanol is harder to light. Some people make a little bit more power with it than race gas. Racing, no two engines are exactly the same. Some tuners can make things work. They do things a little bit different with air fuel ratios and all sorts of stuff. But our E98 is more for beginning bolt-on guys, and it's really made to cut. A lot of people, we like to run between 20 to 40% of that. I don't know where the sweet spot is. Some people run up to 40% of the E98 with gasoline. So it's kind of nice that it takes low-end guys, and they can keep adjusting and bumping up to what is best for their engine and development. Then we have our E85. Our E85 is more designed for crate motor, NA, UTVs, wave runners, jet skis. That's mostly what runs lower horsepower stuff. I would say 300 to 550 horsepower is on our E85. Then our E90, our Red 114 E90, that's where you see the maximum gain of horsepower. Anything over 90% ethanol, you start losing horsepower drastically. So that is the sweet spot where you see the maximum gain. Like I said, there's no lead, no MTB, no race gas. It's very safe. But that 10% is like a bomb lighting off the ethanol, because ethanol is harder to light. So it works really well in boosted applications. We've got guys up to 5,000 horsepower with no intercooler running our fuel.
Whoa. So that's what I was telling you earlier when we were talking.
Cool in the charge too.
And this winter, we've been testing on a new fuel, and hopefully next spring we'll have a launch and be ready to go with it. But I like what we're seeing. I've got 5 different formulas, and we're working with probably 15 to 20 different people, and I have them using and abusing the fuel in different applications. So we're just collecting data and feedback to see what we can best provide to our customer.
All right, feel free to send some to Paul. We'll use it and abuse it for you too.
Exactly.
So the next thing I think that we wanted to really touch on was, you talked about the octane ratings earlier. With the octane ratings and how you set that up, or set up doing octane ratings for ethanol where nobody else is doing it, what do those octane numbers mean? Like, we know that the 114, the E90 is 114 octane.
Right. My E85 is 108 octane. and E98's 115.5. But octane was, in my opinion, and a lot of people that I know, octane doesn't really mean it. It's a fictitious number that VP has come up with to be able to charge you a lot more money for different octanes, because my Red 114, if my 114 octane is 114 octane, it shouldn't be able to be import 118 or 121 octane race gas, and it absolutely kills it. So octane doesn't really matter. To me, it's about how do the additives react during combustion. That's what really matters. So it's like when people call me, I don't look at an octane number. I listen to what they need and then go from there with helping them decide on, do we run E85, E90, or do we do like by E98, do a type of a different blend to be able to help them. So like I said, octane to me is kind of it doesn't really matter.
So you would look more at what, like the caloric content of the fuel, like how much energy it's capable of producing when it burns, more than just octane?
Because if 114 octane is 114 octane, everything would be equal, right? My 114 would be equal to Sunoco and VP and Torco's 114. We'd all make the exact same power, but we don't. It's the additives that's in the fuel that react different, that give it the amount of energy or the cooling. You know, one of the big positives with ethanol is it's high oxygen content, but you also, you know, your engine temps drop 20 to 30 degrees with it. So you can push your engine a lot harder and not have damage due to that.
The same quenching effect, essentially.
And are there any new markets or any new forms of motorsport that Ignite is looking to get its fuel into that is not in as yet?
Yeah, we're doing a lot more. In the United States, our main focus right now is more on dirt track, on working with those. Carburetors are kind of a nightmare. Fuel injection's a snap, but a lot of stuff that's carbureted is kind of a nightmare because most people base their methanol carburetors off, or I'm sorry, their ethanol carburetors are based off of methanol, and we burn 70% less fuel than methanol. So if you buy a ethanol carb, a lot of times it's a methanol carb and all they do is just jet it down. Well, that doesn't work because your metering rolls, your blocks, all the stuff inside of your carb, even though they slowed it down on the jets, it's still putting out way too much fuel and we're overflowing the bowls. So it's been a struggle in the carburetor world to really find somebody that we can work with because, like I said, we've Formula Drift, FD, drifting. Everybody knows us around the world. We're in 42 different countries. You know, we do a lot of wave runners and jet skis. I've been spending a lot of time working on that and working with even on endurance racing with it, with different formulas, helping people. So I think kind of the next thing for us is, and at least in the United States, is dirt track. But one of the things that we're really trying to focus on, especially like down in Central and South America, and even in Europe, is rally cars. I think that's kind of the next thing for me overseas. My focus is really working with the rally cars because there's a lot of those guys, you know, all over the world too.
All right, so that would be like their national series, or is it like a
in national series? But most of those guys are 180 to 300 horsepower. So my E85 is too potent for them. So that's what, you know, the fuels that I'm redeveloping right now, that's what it's going for, is a lot of rally cars. And like I said, I've had interest from Costa Rica, Panama, all the way into Finland, Poland, Europe, everywhere in Europe, wanting it, you know, hey, we like your fuel, but it's great on the high horsepower stuff, but what can you do on the lower stuff to be able to help us?
One thing I'm going to ask is probably going to be a little bit controversial, is be like, so if you were comparing your fuels to VP, like C85 is another popular fuel that people in the ethanol market will use. C85, I think, started to really come about was about eight or 9 years ago. VP developed that. As you say, it's in direct competition to you, but what are the differences, and which fuel would you compare to the C85 if you had to compare one?
I look more at my Red 114 E90 competing with C12, C16, MR12. They're high-end fuels. My E85 is more comparable to what their C85 is, which doesn't have that high of an alcohol content, and then they're putting MTB in it. And like I said earlier, MTB and ethanol don't mix well. They don't like each other during combustion. And part of VP's deal with their fuel is they don't want to make a good ethanol fuel because they don't like it. And so if you actually talk to them, they try to recommend that you buy their other race gases and not even run ethanol. So one of the big things, you know, there's always get questions is your ethanol, is ethanol, is it corrosive? Does it gunk up injectors? Does it, absorb a lot of water? And the answer is no to all of those. Ethanol is 200 proof alcohol. It's a solvent cleaner. It can't gunk up. All the issues with ethanol aren't the ethanol, it's the shit that it's blended with. So that's where, our fuel is not corrosive. There's nothing in it that's corrosive to be able to eat through things. You drink alcohol, well, that's all our fuel is basically drinking alcohol with some other stuff in there. We don't drink it. We don't recommend that. But I wouldn't put anything in your tank that I wouldn't drink first either. But also, there's no reason for it to gunk up anything. There's nothing in there to be able to do that. And then when you get to higher blends of ethanol, especially with what we've got with the purity of the alcohol, unlike anything else around the world, it can absorb water and you'll never even notice it because the ethanol is extremely dry already. You could dump 5 to 8 glasses of water in our fuel, stir it around, and you'll never even notice it. You won't have any issues. So especially down there where you guys are at, it's humid around water. We don't have the inconsistency issues. We don't really have the issues like you have with race gas absorbing water and messing with the fuel. It's bad.
That's why I was saying with it, like I used to leave it sitting in my car.
Still no issue.
Weeks, month, for like a month in between. You just start the car once a week, kind of let it turn over, and that's about it, really.
With our fuel, ethanol's good for 5 to 7 years. It doesn't. If you go grab a bottle of Jack Daniels or whatever you guys are drinking down there, and it's alcohol, and you take a swig now, and you come back in 2 years, it still tastes like alcohol. It doesn't dissipate. Nothing changes. Well, that's how our fuel is. There's nothing in there that changes. I've had guys leave my fuel in their tank for over a year, come back and fire it up, stick it on the dyno, and it makes the exact same horsepower as the day that it was made.
That is good to know.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. I kind of had a different question, Jay.
Yeah.
But it's kind of more along the tuning side. If you're switching from any other fuel and you're going to ignite and you're going to ethanol, I know you said, it's basically pure. You don't have to worry about changing out a lot of things. Is there any specific recommendation you would have in terms of like air-fuel ratio or anything? I know every motor is different, but
it's tough on the air-fuel ratios because a single turbo versus a double turbo versus turbocharged, a supercharger, so that it's a little bit more tricky on that. Our specific gravity, 0.8004, and with that, we try to find out, if you're going to switch over from race gas to ethanol, what type of injectors were you on duty cycle? Are you aware of, you're going to need maybe a little bit of a bigger fuel pump? A lot of it also has to do with airflow and what type of filter, what type of air system you had to be able to pull it in, because ethanol likes two things. It likes to be squeezed and it likes compression. So where it really comes alive is when you throw it the boost. I've got guys 80 to 100 pounds of boost running our fuel. It loves to be squeezed. So like I said, when I talk with customers, I like to find out, where you at injectors. Ethanol likes colder plugs, hotter ignition and colder plugs. So one of the other deals, with our E85 and our E90 is recommending everybody run like a 10. Usually gap 24 to 28.
That's good to know.
A lot of times guys will call me and say, "Hey, we're gapping our plugs and we're dropping them down. We're on about 16 to 17. We're having an issue. We need to tighten them up a little more. It's not staying lit. The issue is it's like pumping water from a fire hydrant through a garden hose. They're not blowing the flame out. They're waterlogging it. They're shooting such a fine stream of fuel through it. If they had to open the gap up a little bit more, because you burn a little bit more ethanol than race gas, about 16 to 18% more, you have a lot, your engine runs much better, but that's where your gap should be on your plugs.
Okay.
So we tell everybody start 24 to 28.
And then try to step to a colder plug. So if you're running like an 8...
You need a 9 or 10. If you're running a 7, it won't work. I've had guys call me and they're like, "Hey, our engine just doesn't sound right. It's not crisp. It's just kind of sounding a little bit off." We've had guys gain 30 to 50 horsepower just by changing their spark plugs from a 7 to a 10.
And it's the same recommended gap, you say about 25?
Yeah, 24 to 28 range is where you should be.
Okay.
Yep.
That's good to know.
Because I think the general rule of thumb everybody has here is tighten up the
Yeah,
gap.
run a tight gap.
You're going to run boost, just tighten it up.
Like you said, you eventually get to the point where you're shooting a fire hydrant through a water hose and you're not letting it burn properly. You're just pumping, you're putting it out.
Would that be part of the issue? Like, one thing that we've seen a lot of the guys running alcohol fuels here, some of the guys running Ignite, that you'll find is you're getting a lot of wash that gets past the rings. That inevitably will get in the oil pan. You kind of get, the smoothie kind of.
Ethanol like to be ran lean, not fat. And so that's one thing that I've noticed, like with a lot of those people. You know, ethanol is very forgiving. I don't know if you guys, you know, on the dyno, but it's extremely forgiving compared to race gas and methanol.
Yeah.
And so it likes to be ran leaner, not fatter. So to those guys, we always recommend leaning it out. They're putting too much fuel into it.
So in other words, you shouldn't be getting that wash once it's chewing properly, or once you're kind of getting proper burn.
So on pump E85, you're going to be burning 30 to 33% more. On my fuel, you should only be burning about 16 to 18% more. So it's much more efficient. We can hit higher horsepower on lower boost with my fuel than you can on pump E85 or race gas.